Also, my privilege this morning to introduce our guest speaker for today, Reverend Doug Avilnesbernal is the executive minister for the Evergreen Baptist Association. He has been mightily involved in intercultural and diversity work for more than 20 years. He has led this group, I think was called the Extreme Team, which placed young adults, Christian young adults in different cultures around the world for a month to have them experience what Christianity was like and how it was influenced by different cultures. He is known to be as a bridge between our God and the different cultures and diverse groups in our churches. In fact, Pastor Pete said that when Crosswalk, because of our own inclusivity, was invited to go to a different conference, that Reverend Doug and the Evergreen Association welcomed us with open arms. So in that same respect, we want to welcome Reverend Doug today with open arms. Welcome, Doug.
All right. Good to see you all. It's very good to be here. It's a joy for me. This is my, I think, second time in person with you, maybe. So it's a joy to be with you. I know we're just getting started as a family, and most of our relationship has been with Pastor Pete. But thank you for your invitation, and thank you for your welcome. I bring you greetings on behalf of your new-ish Evergreen family. We're about 64 churches, and I begin by apologizing for two things. First is I'm sorry for being overdressed, for being here. But I took my tie off and the jacket. But we do have an installation at Berkeley that I have to go after this. So that's, and the second was that sometimes you imagine you have done something, but you haven't quite brought it to real life. So I imagined I sent all I needed to send you all for you to see what we were doing. But it turns out that I never did. So we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. So I thought we spent some time at the end of the book of John. I know the last week you heard what comes just before it in the book. This is when Thomas encounters the whole Jesus and Thomas encounter. And what I thought we'll talk about today is the in-between time of various things, whatever that might be. And this reminds me of a show that is definitely not appropriate for church on Sunday morning, but it's called The In-Betweeners. And it's a British show about middle schoolers. And it's all about them discovering life and all the changes that are happening because their bodies are changing, their mind is changing, the world around them is changing, the expectations people have of them is changing, and all of it is happening at the same time. And the most difficult part about that is that they're not going to a different place. They're staying where they are in the world they're living in, being who they are, but everything is changing. And that in-between time is really interesting. And it occurs to me that you also are in somewhat of an in-between time now, as you're experiencing giving your pastor a sabbatical, which is something we encourage. And I think Pastor Pete alluded to this, that oftentimes what happened is that not many pastors have been able to make it to the 7-year mark at a church. And I think that says a lot about what we just heard, the weight of being a pastor and how difficult it is to carry that. But so let's think about this. We're in the in-between time for the disciples. By the time we get to this scene, this is a few of the disciples just spending time together on a beach. That's great, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to do that, except what happened just prior to that. This is the first time we hear of them being out in the open not in hiding because of fear. So they're out in the open. And then this is what happened. John has this little introduction, which is beautiful. But John always has these little side things that explain to you what happens. You know, and I think the Hollywood has taken that very well. You know, sometimes there's a record scratch, or the person or the actor turns to the screen and says, "You may wonder how I got to be here." Well, John does that all the time. And this is how it begins. This is John chapter 21, verse 1. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. Period. I'm going out fishing, Simon Peter told them. And they said, well, we'll go with you. I want us to think about that period there. You know, so they were all on the beach. And then Simon says, I'm going out fishing. Now, the only time, it seems to me, that the main time when you announce what you're about to do is when nothing is happening, right? I mean, nothing, if you're hanging out with your friends and then you've been together, you're at in vacation or something, and then you just sort of, nothing's happening, everyone is sitting, and then somebody says, well, I'm going for a walk. Well, I'm going to this. So this seems to me, nothing is happening. No one is doing anything. We're trying to figure out, is this a thing? Are we doing something? I'm starting to get bored. So Simon says, I'm going fishing. Then the rest of them say, we'll go with you, because what else are we going to do? So they went out and got into the boat. But that night, they caught nothing. So it was already boring. And then now it's boring, but with work. Great. They caught nothing. What's amazing about this is I want us to think about what they were thinking that whole time. Because do you remember when Jesus was doing, early in Jesus' ministry, when he was on his recruiting tour? And where did he find these guys? Right? They were fishermen. So they went to do what they knew how to do. This was their thing. This was their plan A. This was the thing they did. And in that time, you became what your family was. So they had been training in this for life. Can you imagine the frustration? You take a 3-year break and then suddenly you don't know how to do any of what you used to know how to do? They caught nothing. The whole night, nothing. Sometimes that happens with us at church, right? We know how to do this church thing. And then we do what we know how to do, and then nothing happens. And often these times come in between times where we're exploring things, right? And nothing happened. And then early in the morning, they're bringing the boat in. Sort of the sun is rising, clearly showing their failure to themselves. I wonder what that trip back to shore was like for them after catching nothing. I wonder what Peter was saying to everybody. He says, Peter is always the one that is jumping in, the one that's talking all the time, the one that's ready for the fight. Friend, enemy, it doesn't matter. He's just ready for a fight. He seems to enjoy them. He loves that. So he's ready for a fight. So can you imagine that conversation with Peter? Just, hey, everybody, I thought we knew how to do this. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever done something you know how to do well and it just doesn't work? Okay, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just only happened to me, but when it does happen, it's frustrating, right? Especially if you know how to do it well. And if you're in a team who knows how to do those things well, sometimes it's even more frustrating. Come on, everybody. We know how to do this. What's wrong? What's happening? And then Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. And he called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" I could tell that this is the first experience for you. So for those of you who are not very well experienced with failure, come on this tour with me. But what would that feel like to you if you spent all night trying to fish and you're coming back to shore in the midst of not getting anything, and then somebody says, "Hey, did you catch anything? Do you have any fish?" No, they answered. It doesn't really say, there are no expression. It doesn't tell us how they answered, but could you imagine how would you answer if you just spent hours doing something and you failed at it, and then somebody says, "Hey, how'd it go? Did you do what you thought you were going to do?" No. Or maybe they didn't know him, right? They didn't know who he was, so maybe they were kinder. No. And he says, "Why don't you throw your nets on the side of the boat right now? Right now, when you're by the shore, where nobody fishes. Because there are boats going back and forth, so there are no fish. Why don't you just throw it there?" What would that feel like to you? Would it feel like taunting, maybe? "Hey, you know how you didn't get to do that thing over there where you're supposed to? Why don't you just try here where you're not? See how it goes." And they do it. I don't know why they did it, but they did it. Now, I was thinking about that. Why would I do that? Because at this moment, right, we think they don't know it's Jesus. So right now, it's just this guy who's saying things that are, don't feel that great. So why would you do that? Right? For me, my first thought was, "You kidding me? All right, look, you want to see how wrong you are? Here you go. You'll see. Nothing. There was nothing there. There's going to be nothing here because there was nothing there. So therefore, there's nothing here. But fine. There you go." And then things get worse because they catfish. When you're trying to tell somebody how wrong they are, and then it turns out they're right, is there anything worse than that? Especially for Americans? Right? They were unable to haul the net in because of the large numbers of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord, it is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard this, Simon was Simon. He wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. And this is the part that I love. Then the other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore. Do you ever know people who do that, who do the easiest thing in the most difficult way, right? And forgets about, they just caught a lot of fish. The whole time they've been frustrated. Nothing's happened. Nothing's worked. Now things work. And Peter says, "Yeah, okay, but Jesus," and just jumps right in and then gets to shore, I imagine, at the same time as the ones who were on the boat, because they were in a boat on the water, which is a little easier to move than swimming. Now, this version in RSV says, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, right? Most of the version says he wrapped his garment on him, for he was naked. And the Greek word does mean naked, or without clothes, or without sufficient clothes. Now, if you run a search on Google that says, "Why was Peter naked?" it's a good mixture you get. But a whole lot of it is a lot of people trying to say, well, he wasn't really naked. You know, it seems like what they're most worried about is that the Bible said naked. So they're trying to make it not say naked. And this translation is a little bit of the result of how could we make the Bible not say naked? Which is why I'm saying it so much. But I love this moment of real life, right? Have you ever, this is so, fishing at that time is hard work. You know, getting those nets together, throwing them in, and then hauling them back in. Then you can't just haul the nets in and then throw them out again, right? You haul them in. Now you have to make sure they're untangle them, take any debris that's in them, making sure they're set, because you can't just make it up in a ball and throw it on the side. That's just going to be a ball that's going to sink. You have to fold it in a specific way so that when you throw it, it spreads the right way. So you have to do this work, and you have to grab this wet net. And you know, little secret here, they had no plastic back then, right? So this wasn't as light as this was rope. So they have to fold it in the right way. Now you have to hold it with one hand, grab the right edge so that when you throw it and you pull, it spreads. And now you have to do this over and over and over and over again, especially because you're not catching anything. Right? Because when you catch something, you get a break, because now you have to take the fish out, put them over there, and you get the rejoicing that you actually caught something. So there's that. But if you're catching nothing, you're just doing this over and over and over. Of course he had taken clothes off, right? I mean, you can't wear a coat and do this work. So I love that moment of reality, right? That says he's suffering the consequences of what is happening and living into them. So now, and then he rushes to Jesus. Like he always does. He always rushes into everything, all the time. He fails most of the time at everything, but he does it eagerly. And I love that. You know, eager failure. I wish churches had more of that with them. You know, I don't know if it's going to work, but let's go. And because it also seems like Peter never talks about his failures, right? So we never hear of him being frustrated because he did something that went wrong. Peter is always frustrated because people aren't doing stuff. That's his frustration. And I wish I had that frustration, because most of my frustration is when I'm not doing well, right? For example, the longest walk for a pastor, for this pastor, is from the front to my seat after I've done a sermon. I know it just didn't work. And the awful thing about being a pastor also is that we get to fail with an audience. And you get to do it weekly. Well, not fail weekly. I mean, the possibility of failing, it comes weekly, but the actual, but what I like about Peter, and this is where I like us to focus on, Peter seems to be eager to do. He gets excited about the possibility and he goes with it. Whatever happens after, we know that Peter is going to deal with it eagerly. And that's the first thing I want us to embrace. When there's the in-between time, there are a lot of possibilities open to us. There are a lot of things we could do. And a good way to approach those is to say, whatever comes, we'll just handle it. Let's go. You know, and if that doesn't work, all right, well then let's do this thing. And if this one doesn't work, well, let's do this one. And you know, not thoughtlessly, but rather eagerly. Let's engage with in-between times eagerly, in a Peter way. Because that's the beauty of this time. you have created for yourselves a space where you could not only say, what if, but take some steps into that what if. See what it does. See what stirs, as I think Pastor Pete says, see, just take a few steps here and see what's stirring there. And do it in a Peter way. For me, and this is the fate of children's pastors, right? For me, my children always remind me of Peter, especially my youngest, my 5-year-old, who's somewhere in this building now. Because he does everything eagerly. And if something doesn't work, he has this expression that I love. He says, well, at least, right? So I give you a very real example this weekend. By the way, thank you. You helped us found a hotel that's across the street from Six Flags. And our boys, we came on, the boys saw all of those roller coasters and they were beyond excited. So it's Friday morning. We have our tickets. They're ready to go. We walk over there. It opens at 11, so we get there at 11:01. And there are cones on the entrance. And no noise. But there are other cars there too. There's a line of cars waiting. So we're okay. Maybe they're just getting started. 10 minutes go by and nothing happens. Then a security guard comes by and just sort of says, it's closed. What are you doing? The park is closed today. No one told us, even when we bought the tickets, that the park was closed on Fridays. And we thought we're going on Friday because it's a weekday and there were fewer people. It was closed. So now we have to walk back to the hotel with 2 children, profoundly disappointed. Then someone tells us about this like family fun center, Scandia something. So we go there, right? Now, the 2 places, right? I think. So you know the difference between the 2 places? As we're walking back to our car, I'm walking back to the car with my 5-year-old after we spend the day in Scandia instead of Six Flags. And he says, well, at least we had a super long, fun day. What a Peter way to take the day. The thing we wanted just didn't work. And then we got a second thing that was nowhere near the first, but there was fun in it. So now we say, well, at least that part was fun because we did it. And he was just going at it. That's how I hope you engage with your in-between time, right? As you explore things, as you find yourselves having to come to these Sunday mornings with some stranger who you don't know if it's going to be good or not. When they preach, right? Like, that's tough to engage the unknown, especially you have to sit through me talking. And if you don't know me, that's not easy, which is understandable why every time the pastor leaves, attendance goes down because people are sort of saying, well, I don't really know. What if he says what if he's boring? What if I get nothing from it? What if I don't agree with her? Right? What if she's like too brainy and I don't understand what she's saying? All of those things. So as you engage with the in-between, I hope that you keep in mind, well, at least, and add the fun part in the thing that you had to search for, but it's there. Because that changes how the time goes. That changes how life goes, right? Because the way our passage ends, the way the story ends is that Jesus is waiting for them with breakfast, right? And there's nothing, for me, there's nothing worse than having the person who showed me I was wrong be nice to me and not say, I told you so. I'm just not, and that's exactly what Jesus says. They were wrong the whole time. He asked them, hey, did you catch anything, right? They said, no. And then he said, why don't you try here where there's nothing, and then there's a lot. So there's a lot of wrong for them. And then Jesus, instead of saying, I've been telling you for 3 years, if you listen, these things will work out. So how about you start now? Instead, he says, breakfast is here. If you want, you could bring one of the fish that you caught right now. How good is that? Good job on you. And then bring that, right? What a difficult way to end for real life. Because there's no, and this is we just heard in our worship song, this the radicalness of this welcome, right? The radicalness of this welcome is that it's so profound, so embracing, so all-encompassing, that leaves you thinking sometimes, yeah, but what about the consequences? For me, you didn't even yell at me. Why didn't you even yell at me? Please yell at me. Now, the consequences are there, but they're deep, right? They're felt. They're inside life transforming. They're so beautiful, so well done, so all-encompassing, so part of the story that the change comes from within. And that is a much better way to change than a punitive style, right? So there's still change for the better. There's change to live life fully, but the change happens in an embracing way that's so constant, so present, so loving throughout, while at the same time showing the right way, that as it happens, we get to embrace it instead of becoming the one who was punished, who now then has to punish others so they could get in. Because that's the alternative, right? Church has often denigrated to be in a punitive space that says, well, you have to suffer because I suffered. Same thing with this canceling student loan, right? When somebody says canceling student loans for people who are still paying now, it's a slap on the face to me who paid it all. And then Jesus will say to that, why should others suffer because you suffered? And that's the change, right? We get here. This walk that we have in between for the disciples is they have been suffering and they were wrong. And then Jesus walks with them into the right in an inside way by showing them what the right way is, so that the change begins from within. The discovery is inside. Therefore, embracing happens rather than surrender. And this is where I end. We have two options with Jesus. We could say, I'm going to surrender to Jesus, or I'm going to embrace Jesus. Have you ever, in the history of ever, seen anyone who has been happy to surrender? And have you ever seen anyone transformed by surrender into embracing the force that made them surrender? Whereas embracing changes both sides. And that then, and I'm closing here, that brings us to an interesting question for an in-between time. And this, I'll bring you this question from he's a what I call a Baptist. He's a Baptist prophet. He was a Baptist intellectual who lived in the late 19th century. He was a pastor in New York City, amazing writer, the one who translated the social gospel for the church, right? Walter Rauschenbusch. And he says, Have we the will to match our knowledge? Can we marshal the moral forces capable of breaking what must be broken and then building what must be built? Right? I mean, we all know faith as a Christian. Are we capable to marshal our knowledge? Can we live what we know? And then, do we have the will and the strength to break what needs to be broken so that we could build what needs to be built? Now, you have experience in this. Just the fact that you have tables in a sanctuary gives you, because this is really my ending. Churches always have trouble breaking the menial stuff. And we get stuck there. What do you mean we're not going to have pews? Right? We always get stuck there. But if you're willing to get past that, you will go somewhere. So in your in-between time this season, know that you're becoming something, but you're not going anywhere. You're not changing who you are, but you are, in a sense, changing how you are. May you do that in the Peter sense, right? Embrace it. And when it doesn't work, because many times it's not going to, then say, well, at least and then find a little bit of fun in there, right? Because often, there's breakfast for you at the end, right? Or in the case of my boys, turns out Six Flags is open on Saturday, and they let us use our weekday tickets. No problem. So, in your in-between, do embrace it in a Peter sense. Sometimes you might even jump in both feet first. See what happens. Because if that doesn't work, Jesus will always be there for you, waiting and guiding you in the right way without the "I told you so." Amen.